Hey gang, Z-Man here. Today we're going to learn how to kit bash a building. So I have the City Classics East Ohio Street building, but we have three of them and we're going to put them together to make a big commercial block. So let me show you the reason why. Let's go down to the Tina Bird test track and I'll show you why. Before we start, I just want to show you the finished product on the workbench and then on the layout. I think it's important to build your own buildings and to learn the skills in order to build your own buildings because you're going to get a better product. And if you have a better product, your layout's going to look better and you're going to feel better about your layout. The reason why I say this is because I went to a local model train store near me and I saw some pretty atrocious buildings. My whole intent is to help you build better buildings so your layout looks good. Okay, so I just want to go over a few things about updates on the layout before we go and build our building and show you the reason why we need to build the building that we're building today. So I put in roads on the layout. I have a flat that's in back of that three-story building there, and as we move down the block, today's building is going to be essentially three of these City Classics East Ohio Street buildings. So with this spare one, this is an earlier model I built. It makes a nice background building now. So we're going to be placing the buildings down here. So we need more buildings in order to complete Tinaberg. And then I can start moving down the line with finishing the road and then putting in sidewalks. So that's why we're doing this project today. This is just an apology before we start the video. It snowed quite a bit here where I live, so I got my wood stove on. So if you hear this clicking noise, it's my eco fans, don't mind it. Let's go over a few items we're going to need today. So we're going to need the kits, of course, some glue, our hobby knife, chisel knife in order to clean up the edges, some dusting brushes so we can weather the building, sanding paper to get the edges smooth, a level to make sure it's level, a writing utensil to set up the roof correctly, paint brushes in order to paint the building. We're also going to be using spray paint, so I'll go over that in the next section about what paints we're using today. And we're actually going to be using the blue tape today because we're going to be painting two different sections. I want the storefront in a blue and then the rest of the building in brick and concrete. So I'm going to open up one of the kits just to show you what is all inside of it so we know what we're building. So here's the facade, the rear, come on, the two sides, the roof material, but I think we're going to have to use another sheet of styrene in order to get that done. So we have the glass, that's just clear plastic, plus we have the instructions. So what's neat about these kits is that they can actually be joined together, so we're actually going to be doing this by creating 3 storefronts to make a commercial block. And lastly, these kits do come with a very basic interior kit, just so you don't have an empty building. Alright, let's go over paint next. Here are the paints that we're going to use today. So, for the front of the facade, we're going to use this Morocco Red by Bear Premium. We're also going to use it on the rear and on the sides. Later, we're going to go in and hand paint these doors, and then all the windows will be a different color. I think I'm going to go with just plain white, so we'll use white paint for that. We have this intermediate blue, that's going to be for our facade up here at the storefront. And then we're going to be using some Tamiya light gray as a kind of a concrete or stone color for our cornice up here. But the next step is we got to plan out how this is going to look with 3 storefronts put together, and we also have to make sure that we're even when these 3 are put together. Before we measure, these kits are meant to be kit bashed, and they have these additional sides that get glued on if you need them. But the first step is we need to take our chisel knife and separate them so we can get a good measurement of the rears and we get this thing even. This is the point of the chisel knife, is just to take out the spare flashing that's keeping these together. Okay, now that I got that separated, let's see how this looks. Alright, so this front is now a little bit shorter than this is wide. Let me cut out the rest of the pieces and we'll start doing the measurement. Before I forget, one of the most important things we have to do is clean up the edges, just to make sure everything measures up correctly. We also have to knock down these little pieces of flashing towards the back so we get a nice even surface and we can measure correctly. Now we're just looking down and knocking off that little bit of flashing. And because there's 2 pieces here, we have to make sure that this spare is also clean. So you knock down your flashing with your chisel knife first, and then you start sanding. And that ensures that we have a nice surface to work with. See if we got that nice and smooth. Yep. And then get that to knock down the back. So I'll knock the rest of these out and then we'll get into measurement. After looking over the instructions, we have a little bit of work to do to make sure that these come up nice and even. So my plan is to use this red one. These kits are from different time periods. One of them looked like they were from the 90s, just leftover new old stock. So I'm going to further sand this side down so we get an even flush fit with there, and I'm going to sand this side down to get a flush fit there, and then we have to glue this piece to be the end of the building. After quite a bit of sanding, we now have nice flush edges that we can glue. There's one tool I forgot to mention that we needed today, which is a ruler so we can set these down as we glue these edges. So I'm going to glue off camera to put this together. So when you glue those edges together, the next thing you want to do is squeeze them and then put them down on the bottom of the ruler so you get everything nice and even. Make sense? Alright, let me glue this off camera and then I'll show you what the end result is. Okay, I got this glued together. I'm going to go over again what I did, which is I glued this seam, then I squeezed it together, and then squeezed down here on the ruler. I glued this edge, again squeezing together, and then putting it down on the ruler so this is all nice and even, and this is all nice and even. And lastly, there was one of these edges that I had to glue over here, so we get this nice effect of this, kind of like edge cornice, and then it goes down, making a lower detail, connecting it to the storefront, and then coming up, and then just going along the side there, and then you can see on the tops that our cornices now look like they're flown across. The next one we're going to do is the rears. So I'm going to glue these together and show you the end result. After looking at this won't be so bad. I can glue this on camera to show you exactly what I was doing. So I'm going to take out this middle piece and I'm going to glue along the edge Getting a good amount of glue on there so we get a good bond. Again, plastic cement it actually melts the plastic together. So I take it and I go like that. So we got some residual glue, so you just go like that. Any sort of glue will be hidden by the paint. This is actually one of the few times that we glue before we start painting. Because we're kit bashing 3 buildings together, we need to put our pieces together before we paint them. So I'm gluing this edge now. Put that down, get that back in the cap. Little mistake there. Gonna have to re-glue. Had the wrong edge because I was in a rush. That's one of those things. Don't be in a rush. I'm glad I caught that before I glued it on, because this tester cement really does bond plastic models together as it was designed to. Again, taking that straight edge, pressing down, and then coming here to the sides and make sure we got a nice good bond. Clean up any extra residual mess. And now these 3 pieces are together. Okay, now that we gave this time to dry, we have a good bond, but we want to make it a little stronger. So off camera, I cut 2 pieces of 0.80 by 0.80 inch styrene that we're going to put here on the bottom and fit flush. And then just above where you see these little circles, we're going to put the second piece of styrene here to act as a roof support. So I cut it to this length because the sides are going to glue like this. There's one side. Nope, that's the taller one. That's the shorter one. Those sides are going to glue like that, so we didn't want that polystyrene getting in the way of gluing these edges. So again, this is just a great idea for you guys, so you can make the building a little bit stronger if you're putting different pieces together, to put polystyrene on the bottom and the top. That will also help your roof support again. Now that I have this glued, I'm going to do the same over here, but I'm going to put this polystyrene strip over these circular things. I want to try to hide that so when we put the roof on, we get this looking better. And the same thing with this piece of polystyrene. We're going to put it down here as a support. After gluing the front and the rear and setting up the roof support, I did just kind of like a pre-glue, but I used my blue tape to make sure that everything fit, so we know that this goes together correctly. Now these roof pieces, while they are nice, it's not going to look good if we have 3 different pieces of polystyrene sitting on top of the roof. So I'm going to paint a big piece of 0.40 thickness polystyrene together, so we can then later cut in order to fit our roof. And that's going to be a part that we're going to need our ruler in order to measure, but I think it's going to look better if we use just one solid sheet of polystyrene. I can always save these and put these in my parts kit for later. Before we get off in the paint, let me explain the intent of this building. So I wanted to create a late 19th century to mid 20th century storefront where, you know, this style is very common in eastern cities as well as some older sections of western cities. But because I modeled something like Pittsburgh, I saw a lot of these buildings where they were actually put together and they had 3 different storefronts or more. And they're called commercial blocks. So this is going to be one of the centerpieces in the layout. That's why painting this is going to be super important to get it right. So the next step is we're going to take our blue paint and we're going to block off the storefront and the cornice work, and then we're going to paint this red. And then after that dries, we're going to cover up the red sections with the blue tape and then paint down here. Paint the storefront and then the cornice work. Here's the plan, gang. So I'm going to hit this middle section, even going over where you see where this should be concrete, in red. We want our bricks to be all painted We can hit that later with our concrete color, this Tamiya Light Gray. So I'm going to spray this next, and we're going to let it dry. We're going to let it dry real good, and then we'll work on spray painting the bottom, where the storefront is. Then after that, we'll spray the top over here. And the whole intent of that is to get this top section real good, not to paint it with red because we're using a lighter color such as gray. This hand paint will help take care of these little details that I have covered up. But prep work is the most important thing if you want to get your paint straight. Take your time. Blue tape is amazing, works for real world painters, not just modelers. So let's go get this into paint. Let's get this brick red paint on because this plastic came up in 2 different colors. We definitely want to paint it now, or else it's going to look weird. And don't forget to paint the sides because we have that side detail. Okay, let's get that dry, and then I'll show you that we're going to tape off this section and then take care of the storefront and the cornice. For the sake of time, I've also painted the sides and the rear all that same bare Moroccan red color. It really does make a very nice brick color. You don't have to use model paint. There's plenty of acrylic-friendly paints that you can get from Home Depot or Lowe's or True Value or whatever hardware store that you go to, even Walmart. And this is a huge surface, so I wanted to use basically a value can of spray paint. The paint looks good, and it doesn't cost that much. It's about $7 to $8 per can. The little Tamiyas and the little testers cans like this, these generally run for about $6 to $8 a piece. With inflation, I've seen them go close towards 10. So, I mean, it's up to you and what you want to do and how you want to use paint. However, whenever you paint, make sure that you pick a paint that is plastic friendly or resin friendly before you go paint and potentially melt a model. Okay, so off camera, I took the liberty to tape this really good so we don't get overspray underneath, over here on the brick. We want to cover up the entire brick section so we don't get any overspray that hits our brick and then discolors it, because then you're going to have to go paint it again. We don't want to do that. Preparation is key with painting. So we're going to paint this blue, and then we're going to paint this top in the concrete color, like I said. Let's take care of the storefront first. We're going to paint that in the intermediate blue. We're going to paint the darker color first, just in case overspray travels up. And then we'll take care of the lighter color, which is this, this gray color by Tamiya. Don't forget the sides. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Let's get the cornice. Okay, we're painted up. Let's let it dry. Just like in my building tutorial video, don't forget to paint the tops so you don't have oddness happening when you put the roof on. So we're just going to lightly spray the top so that blends in and your building looks good. I've taken care of the front off camera, so I want to show you what that looks like next. Just like when I showed you that you should spray the tops, I did this one off camera where the blue tape was still on, and I painted the same color as the front so we get a matching effect. So here's the front of our building. We've got this in that intermediate blue, and we've got the top in the gray, but you can see that we've had a little bit of overspray, so we're going to touch that up with some red paint. Then we also have where we didn't cover where these details should be gray. That's really simple to fix. We'll just use this gray paint that matches to paint that. And then we'll start working into painting the windows. So with painting the windows, you're going to pick a color of window that you want. Using a finer brush, you're going to paint the inside of the window. You want to work the low details for the high details first. Like this will be concrete, so I'll paint that first, and then you want to work the low details next, so you don't get drip down. So you paint the inside of the window according to the angles, and then you're going to turn, and then paint, and then turn, and paint. So you get your windows really nice and well done. So, like I said, paint, turn, paint, and turn, paint. I'm going to do this off camera, and then I'll show you what the product looks like. Before I paint the windows, I just want to show you what I did. So I painted these spots over here that got hit in the red. I then used red paint to cover up some of the overspray. We did have a little. Then I painted the cornices that matching gray in order to get, you know, the same matching as the cornice. And then you can't forget the tops of the cornices. So I painted these after I did the front, and there's detail over here where I painted them after I did the front and the top. So let me get on to the windows next, and I'll show you what I did. Okay, so I got the windows done as well as the trim. It just takes a little bit of time because this was 3 kits put together. Painting the windows took quite a bit of time. So I took care of the front, painted the windows white, and then with the rear section, I have painted the windows white and the doors green. So that's complete, as well as the sides. Only one of the sides had windows on it. The other one's just straight brick. But, you know, we need some gray up here for the top of the roof, and then gray along here for the windowsills to be that concrete. So our next step is to weather it. There's a few imperfections in this model, and weathering is just going to buff them out. It's going to look really good, so let's go into doing the brick wash. The brick wash is actually a weathering effect, so let me show you that next. So the first part of weathering is also part painting. This is a brick wash. This is one part white paint plus 8 parts paint thinner. So we're going to get that good and shaken up. We're going to take out the protective cap, and then we're going to test on a scrap piece of brick to make sure that our brick wash is of the right mixture before we go on to our actual model. So you get it wet, and then as you can see, that's just streaming on down, giving us our brick lines. So this wash is good. We can go on now and put some wash on the model. One thing about this technique is you gotta work fast. So any excess is just going to run off. You don't want to brush too hard because this has a lot of paint thinner in it. And it's going to dissolve some of that red paint that we have. But at the same time, it is spreading out the white paint that is mixed in the paint thinner to give us those brick lines. So if you want to do this, just go out and experiment. Make sure you got some scrap brick to play with it. But that mixture is 1 to 8. So 1 part paint, and then 8 parts paint thinner. So with the excess, you're just going to brush it off. And then to keep our lines, we're going to lay it flat and let it dry. So I'm going to go finish off the rest, and then I'll show you what it looks like before we put our weathering powders on. Here's what our building looks like after using the brick wash. So we got the front looking pretty nice. We can see some brick lines. And then the sides came out really good, but the rear looks like it came out the best. It is really kind of random the way the wash flows down it. But I think it's essential for making any brick building to put this brick wash on. Our next step is to go weather the building with our pan pastels. With the pan pastels, we're going to concentrate on using the lighter colors, such as the grays, because just like the last building tutorial, this is not an industrial building, so we're not going to be using the truly dark colors. But we can take a little bit of dark and brush it up on the top. Because soot tends to get dark towards the top as it falls out of the sky and gets lighter as it goes down. So we're just going to do a couple of splotches. Brush that in a little bit. And then we're going to take a wet sponge and we're going to streak it on down. This acts like rain. Just like the last building tutorial, we're going to spread out our pan pastels with a little swiping and then dragging down. And we're going to get this nice little rain effect going. Now there's some leftover sponge and we'll have to brush that off. You can see that we're getting a nice little weathering effect where things are streaking down with the rain. So I'm just going to play with this a little bit more. And I didn't want to go too crazy on this one. Just kind of like a medium weathering. Now let me go take the rear. And same thing applies. So I'm going to put a little darker soot towards the top. And another good place to put the dark is underneath windowsills. And it's also a spot where you see a lot of collection. Alright, as you go down, start going lighter. Just take little light spots and hit it around. This is going to spread out once we get the sponge on it. Alright, you're going to see how this streaks down with a little bit of the damp sponge. If it tends to be heavy like this section, you can just go across and then you can spread down. This is going to give our brick that nice aging effect. I just want to add a little more there and then streak it down. Like I said in the last video, if you go a little heavy, you can take the scour side and then scour in and then drag down. We're getting that nice dirty look, just like how older buildings were back in the day. So with the front, we're not going to hit it off too much. We're going to put a little bit on. Like I said in the last video, they tended to clean their buildings. They cared about the fronts a little bit more, and they wouldn't care about the sides. I'm going to put a little bit on top here. And because the sponge is already dirty, it's going to have some of the previous weathering on it. So then we can streak it on down. And we need a little bit more on these high points over here where the building juts out a little bit, because that's going to catch the dirt. And streak it down. This is really going to show up once you see the finished product after we seal it. There was something I forgot in the last video is I do seal my buildings with dull coat. That's so it's not dirty to the touch. Just taking that, streaking it on down. And it's all random. So let me finish off the last side, and then we'll get this thing and sprayed with dull coat. A viewer had a great comment in my last building video, and he asked me, "Hey, do you put dull coat on your buildings?" And I said, I absolutely do. So in this video, I'm definitely going to show you that I put dull coat on my buildings. And I do that so they're nice and clean to the touch, and this seals in that weathering effect. And the dull coat's going to also act as a weathering agent, just giving it a duller look so it doesn't look like a big shiny building. So next we're going to put in the glass. Now that the dull coat is dried, we're looking pretty good. The building's looking nice and weathered. I put a nice little medium weathering on it. Our next step is to put on the glass. The kit came with lots of plastic sheet in order to cover the glass. Now when we put this in, we're going to try to keep this glass off the edge so we can glue the building cleanly. So we're going to make some cuts here. That mark will be there so we can put this in the paper cutter, which is going to save us a lot of time. And then up here we can cut because that's where the roof line is. So I've sized that piece. Let me show you what it looks like on the paper cutter. So now we're going to match up our lines. It's always good to start with the height portion first. Let me get that into the blade and then cut. So I got myself a new paper cutter because it wasn't that it was dull. I'd actually broken the paper cutter earlier, so it was broken in the middle. So we're going to line up the next line and cut. Now let's go back to the model and see how it fits. Alright, so we got our glass. Let me clean that off a little bit. Now we can put it in. And voila, it fits. So the next step is to glue it. So we're going to glue along the edges. And then we're going to glue in the middle so it has a nice bit of support. Like I said before, I used to do individual windows, but then I realized I was wasting my time. The second part of that was occasionally the glue lets go. So when I was losing individual windows, it sucked more. So when I put a lot more glue on, like I'm doing right now where it's supported in the middle very well, the glass tends to stay in a little bit more. So this is just 10 years of learning. And because we got a generous amount of material, we don't have to feel bad about wasting it. So just remember, put your fingers up, get that nice and smooth, and then our first piece of glass is in. I'm going to finish up the rest of the sections, but it works pretty much the same way. Measure, fit, size, and then cut, and then glue. So I have the glass in, but I'm going to have to assemble this off camera. but it goes like this. You take the two sides and you put them in like so, gluing along this edge here and then sandwiching it together. I used rubber bands last time to keep this thing together, but I'm going to have to just use my hands because I don't have any rubber bands big enough for this project. So the rear wall, the glue goes over here on this edge, and then it gets sandwiched into that side. So when I see you next, this building will be up. Through the magic of editing, this building is now put together except for the roof. It took me a good 10 minutes of holding this together because rubber bands just wouldn't fit. But this building is assembled. And the next step is to talk about putting on the roof. I didn't paint the roof because I wanted to cut this and then use the leftover polystyrene for another project. So let's get on top of measuring. Our roof needs to be 4 7/8 by 9 13/16, but I'm going to use this 70 scale feet instead, just because I don't see 16th measurements on my ruler. So I'm going to mark this out and then we're going to cut it. So I got our cut marks marked out, and on a paper cutter it's always good to do the shorter side first. Okay. Now lengthwise, get that marked up to the blade. Alright, let's see if it fits. The roof fits, but however, we have a bit of a bow with this section of wall. That's just because the plastic is bent in. I should have inspected with the 6 sides that I had for a better side, but this will work. We just have to paint it now, and then this building will be done. Okay, with the roof installed, despite a couple of minor flaws over here that were caused by the model itself, I think I've done a pretty good job of making this building out of 3 kits. So let's get it onto the test track in Tinaberg and let's see how it looks. Here is our completed building on the Tinaberg test track. Let's take a closer look at it. So after all that hard work, we got a good looking building that takes up 3 storefronts worth of space. And it's really starting to fill in here. Now I am going to change the building layout until I get all the buildings filled in all the way down the city street. But I did this exercise, one, you guys can Kitbash too. I know you can. It takes a little bit of experience. Try building basic buildings first, because kitbashing requires a lot of ingenuity and a lot of creativity. You got to be able to envision what the product looks like before it's finished. And just like you saw, measurement is really important. We had one little mistake, which was that one side where I should have chosen a better side. But overall, the building still looks good. So I'm just going to move this down here so we can get a corner shot looking from the station. And everything still looks good. So even with little mistakes, you can recover. This wasn't perfect, but it still looks really good. So all I have to say is if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. But even more importantly, if you know a fellow model railroader out there that can be helped by my videos, please share them. So thank you again, and thank you for watching my video. I'll see you next time.